I'm so mad right now because I just filmed this whole video and I didn't hit record. It has been now a little bit over 20 years since I've graduated from high school. Dear God. Hi, my name's Erica. I'm blind, and I want to talk about some accommodations that I used to get back in middle school and high school. So back in middle school, we're talking, I graduated middle school 2002. So years before that. So for sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, my school was more aware. I had more of like a formal plan stating my visual impairment and things like that. So they wanted to be helpful and give me certain accommodations. So one of the accommodations that they had for me is they thought it would be helpful to enlarge the print of my textbooks, which I thought cool, would be helpful because the text in our textbooks was really small. But that's not exactly how it turned out. And I'm going to get hands-free because I'm going to show you. I made a little demo. I made a little prop. So I'm going to explain it also for those who don't have enough vision to see. But right now I'm holding up a regular sheet of paper that is 8.5 inches by 11 inches. So typical sheet of paper. This was like the typical size of our textbooks, okay? So what I thought they were going to do is just take the regular size of our textbooks and just enlarge the print inside of it. And I figured it would become a thicker book because, you know, you're making the text much larger. But what ended up happening was this. It turned into two sheets of paper stacked on top of each other. And this is me being generously small. Like, I think it was even much larger than this. But for the sake of the prop, it turned into this. So it turned into mega textbook. And this book would never fit on my desk. It would always like lean over the edge of my desk. And then not only did I only get just one mega textbook, but because it still didn't fit all the material of the regular book, my one textbook that was this size turned into four that were this size. So guess who never brought their books to class? We're also really testing out the noise cancellation of this mic because it seems like my neighbor outside is using a saw for something. So the hallways of my middle school were very dimly lit and they were dark gray. So with my RP, I just can't see very well in those type of lighting conditions. So what they thought would be helpful for me is they designated out of the 4 stairwells, they designated 1 stairwell for me that they would modify a little bit with electric yellow painter's tape, I suspect. And they lined all the edges of each step for just that singular stairwell. And that was my stairs to use whenever I had to go to a class that was either, you know, upstairs or downstairs and just navigate that way, which that accommodation was actually very helpful to me. But then it was a little bit embarrassing just walking only that stairwell and then just hearing all the other kids talk about like, oh, why did the school do this? It looks so ugly. It looks so stupid. And then imagine over time, because it was painter's tape, most likely, with everyone walking on it and everything like that, it started to peel and come off eventually. And I don't think over the course of those 3 years, they really refreshed it at all. Another accommodation that they attempted, but ultimately it just wasn't functional, was once they realized I wasn't taking my mega textbooks to class and they were just forever in my locker, they attempted to make some of my books that were more for like reading and English that you just really needed to read a lot of the stories, a lot of the text, a lot of different things like that. They tried to make them into audiobooks. So mind you, the year 2000, we didn't have Audible. We didn't have any of those things for all my young ones out there. But what we had at that point is cassette tapes. So I had a cassette tape player, and then one textbook, I think, turned into about like 30 tapes. But it wasn't very helpful because and then they never really labeled the tapes. They just labeled them like 1 to 30, and then it was left up to me to determine what was on what tape. And then I could never find anything, especially say if the teacher didn't want to start in the beginning of the textbook and would start at some point, like, let's do chapter 10. I have no idea what tape that was. So I never really took the time to sit there and like rewind and fast forward and rewind and fast forward and try to figure out what I was supposed to listen to. So then I just never participated in class. So actually, sixth grade was when I started my orientation and mobility training. So I was starting the training to use my cane, and I received my first cane at that time. And I remember it was so embarrassing. I remember once I was doing my training outside, so they had me, walk around the perimeter of my school and down the block from my school and up the hill and different things and practice how to cross the street. I remember once I was doing my mobility training, and then it happened to be a day that they did a fire drill. So everyone came outside and they watched me do my thing, just walk back and forth with my stick. Even though I started my cane training in middle school, I actually didn't really start using my cane until college. I think it was about my sophomore year of college is when I really started to use my cane. And a lot of people were really confused by it because obviously they saw me just walk around campus and they were my friends. And I remember one of my friends at the time, he was like, "Can I ask you something?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, of course." And he's like, "Why are you walking around with a blind man's cane?" As if I stole a random blind man's cane and just like consider it mine now. It was just back then I just had so much shame about my disability and just felt that it just made me so much different than everyone else. It's crazy to say at this point, 20 years later, how much that time can really do in terms of accepting your disability. And this is not to say that I still don't experience shame and things like that, because there are still plenty of people in my life that have no idea about my disability altogether, or also don't fully understand the severity of what it is. But I've definitely come such a long way.